Hey there, fellow literature explorers. Today, we turn our gaze toward The Dark Knight, a 2008 superhero crime thriller that offers much more than narrative surface. It's a text rich with thematic complexity, symbolic resonance, and intricate character work that invites rigorous analysis. I'm delighted you've joined me, because in this video, we'll engage in a detailed examination of its cinematic language, narrative structure, and intertextual layers that shape its meaning. We'll begin by situating the film within its cultural and theoretical context, unpacking its stylistic choices and the director's auteur signature. Next, I'll provide a concise yet nuanced overview of the narrative arc, highlighting the film's core motifs without diluting its interpretive possibilities. From there, we'll delve into a compelling plot summary that foregrounds its narrative strategies and rhetorical devices, all framed to prepare you for the unfolding complexities. Crucially, we'll tease key thematic elements and pivotal narrative shifts, those moments that challenge conventional readings and open the text to multiple interpretations. Throughout, expect us to consider character dynamics, cinematic techniques like mise-en-scene and editing, and the film's engagement with broader discourses in film and literary theory. Prepare to engage with this film not just as viewers, but as scholars, questioning, interpreting, and appreciating the layers beneath its surface. So, get comfortable, sharpen your critical lens, and let's embark on an intellectually rewarding exploration of this cinematic work. What strikes you first is how effortlessly the film situates itself between spectacle and substance. It announces itself as a story about masked vigilantes and theatrical villains, yet from the very beginning, you sense something else moving beneath the surface. The opening sequence is a masterstroke of tension. Masked criminals carrying out a precision bank heist, each one discarding his usefulness to the next until betrayal becomes the order of the day. The cityscape is filmed not as a backdrop but as a labyrinth of corruption and power, gleaming skyscrapers hiding rot at their foundations. The film establishes immediately that chaos and order are in constant negotiation, and that morality will be tested at every level: individual, communal, institutional. An overview of the story reveals a narrative structure as taut as it is complex. At its core, it is about the fragile balance between justice and anarchy, about how institutions struggle to function when terror refuses to play by rules. A vigilante hero finds himself caught between his duty to protect the city and his personal longing for a life outside the mask. The district attorney emerges as a beacon of hope, a man seemingly incorruptible who might restore legitimacy to a broken legal system. Yet circling them both is a figure of pure unpredictability, a villain who seeks no money, no power, no empire, only the thrill of watching structures collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. What unfolds is not a simple contest of good versus evil but a meditation on how far one must go to preserve order when chaos mocks every effort to contain it. The plot moves with relentless urgency. Early scenes show a city that feels both alive and suffocating, its citizens clinging to hope but wary of the criminals who still thrive in the shadows. The vigilante and his allies coordinate to dismantle organized crime, believing they are on the cusp of real victory. The district attorney prosecutes cases with dazzling charisma, winning the people's trust and unsettling the criminal underworld. For a moment, it seems the tide might turn, that justice might triumph not through a masked figure but through institutions restored. Yet into this fragile optimism steps a clown-faced specter of chaos, who inverts every expectation. He does not rob banks for wealth but to make a point. He does not kill to remove enemies but to prove that fear is stronger than reason. With each move, he destabilizes the very logic upon which justice is built. One of the most exciting aspects of the story is how it teases you with possibilities, only to twist them into something darker. There is a love triangle woven into the larger chaos. Two men bound by their devotion to the same woman, one representing hope through law, the other through vigilantism. Their conflict is not only romantic but symbolic, a struggle over which path will save the city. Yet love here is not soft but brutal, because it forces impossible choices. When tragedy strikes, and lives are placed on a sadistic timer, the narrative fractures into heartbreak, proving that even love is not immune to the villain's cruel games. The story is filled with moments that demand you lean forward in your seat. Consider the interrogation room, where the vigilante and the villain face each other under harsh fluorescent light. Here, fists meet laughter, rage meets mockery, and the audience realizes that brute force cannot unravel chaos. The villain thrives on pain, delights in unpredictability, and turns the very act of interrogation into a stage play where the supposed hero is stripped of control. This is not merely dialogue, it is philosophy in combat, two ideologies clashing in a room too small to contain them. The film builds toward its twists with precision. The rise of the district attorney as a symbol of incorruptibility is juxtaposed with the slow erosion of his faith in justice. He becomes the embodiment of the city's fragile hope, the man who could restore faith in institutions. And yet, through a series of carefully orchestrated manipulations, he is shattered, both physically and morally, until his very name becomes a cruel irony. His transformation is the narrative's sharpest knife, cutting not only into the characters but into the audience's belief in heroes themselves. Even the spectacle sequences, thrilling as they are, exist not just for action but for metaphor. Trucks flip in impossible arcs, explosions shatter the night sky, yet every moment of destruction serves a purpose: to demonstrate how fragile structures of order truly are. The villain engineers scenarios where ordinary citizens must choose between self-preservation and compassion, where fairies loaded with innocence become philosophical experiments. The suspense is unbearable, but the lesson clear. Institutions may crumble, but morality survives only if individuals choose it. As the story nears its resolution, the vigilante faces not only external enemies but the internal cost of his choices. He realizes that saving the city requires sacrifice, that sometimes symbols must be destroyed to preserve belief. The final twist is devastating precisely because it refuses catharsis. The audience watches as truth is obscured, as one man bears blame not because he deserves it but because the people need to believe in something unbroken. It is in this refusal to deliver a clean victory that the film achieves greatness. It insists that heroism is not glory but burden, not triumph but exile. The themes teased throughout, chaos versus order, truth versus illusion, justice versus corruption, culminate in a finale that lingers like a bruise. You leave not with the satisfaction of resolution but with the ache of questions unresolved. How far should one go to preserve order? Can justice survive when its champions fall? Is chaos inevitable, or is it only unleashed when society builds its foundations on hypocrisy? What makes this film unforgettable is that its twists and turns do not exist merely to shock but to deepen reflection. Every revelation, every betrayal, every act of violence opens the door to interpretation. It is a film that refuses to let you walk away clean. Instead, it drags you into its shadows and demands that you sit with them. And so, as we step back, we see the film not as a simple story of masked heroes and painted villains, but as a profound exploration of morality, power, and sacrifice. Its introduction pulled us into a world shimmering with contradiction. Its overview revealed a structure built on tension between chaos and order, its plot swept us through heartbreak and spectacle, and its twists left us questioning not only the characters but ourselves. That is the true genius of this work. It entertains, yes, but it also unsettles, provokes, and lingers. The journey through this story reminds us that cinema, at its best, is not simply a mirror of fantasy but a mirror of ourselves. And in that reflection, sometimes we see not the heroes we want but the fragile, flawed humanity we must confront. It begins with a hum of unease, a city skyline bathed in sunlight that feels cold rather than warm, glass towers gleaming like brittle ornaments above a metropolis that has long since forgotten stability. The opening image is deceptively serene, until the window explodes in silence, a rope fires across the street, and figures in clown masks glide over an abyss of traffic and steel. From the first moment, the story insists on a kind of violence that is not just physical but philosophical. The men descending on the bank move with precision, their clown disguises grotesque, playful, and menacing all at once. Each is focused, each carrying out their role with grim efficiency, yet one by one they are eliminated, killed by their own partners until only one remains. It is a heist staged like a parable, betrayal as inevitability, greed as currency, chaos masquerading as order. When the final mask is peeled away and the one who orchestrated the whole operation reveals himself, the audience already knows the city has been thrown into the hands of someone who does not play by familiar rules. The city itself is suffocating under the weight of contradiction. On the surface, organized crime is being dismantled. Mobs who once controlled districts are cornered, their money seized, their leaders jailed. The streets echo with rumors that a masked figure has made them afraid to conduct business, a lone vigilante who descends at night with fists and gadgets, leaving criminals broken and citizens whispering hope. There is a sense that the city might actually be changing. And yet, beneath that fragile optimism lies decay. Corruption still threads through institutions like veins of rot through wood. Police officers accept bribes as casually as cigarettes. Judges sign papers with hands that have already been bought. The vigilante may strike fear into criminals, but fear alone cannot cleanse the city's foundations. In the midst of this, a new figure emerges, one who represents legitimacy, a man who does not wear a mask, whose weapon is not fear but charisma and faith in the law. The district attorney bursts into the narrative with the energy of a reformer, prosecuting mob leaders with dazzling confidence, turning his courtroom into a stage where justice finally appears to stand a chance. His speeches ignite belief, his fearless pursuit of cases unsettles criminals, and his face, young, determined, incorruptible, becomes a symbol of hope. He seems everything the vigilante is not: public, transparent, lawful. For a moment, you can almost believe that the city's salvation might come not from shadows but from sunlight. But hope, in this story, is always fragile. The bank robbery ripples outward, shaking the foundations of organized crime. Money that was once secure is gone, or in jeopardy, and the clown-faced thief begins to court the city's criminals with his unique proposition: abandon structure, embrace chaos. At first, the mob leaders laugh him off, dismissing him as a lunatic with makeup and bravado. Yet even in their mockery, unease stirs. They recognize what audiences already know: that madness is not weakness here but strategy. The thief is unpredictable, and unpredictability terrifies men who rely on deals and rules. Parallel to this, the vigilante struggles with his own contradictions. By night, he terrorizes the criminals. By day, he yearns for a life outside the mask. His love for a woman binds him to the hope of escape. She admires him but cannot give herself to him, not while he hides behind armor, not while his path is one of violence in shadows. Her heart leans toward the district attorney, whose transparency and legitimacy offer the kind of stability she longs for. Their triangle is not merely romantic but symbolic. One represents order through law, the other order through fear, and she is the thread between them, the one who forces each man to confront the insufficiency of his path. Events escalate as the clown-faced anarchist begins his campaign of terror. He does not strike for money or power but for message. Public officials are threatened, assassinations are staged with theatrical flair, and the city learns quickly that he is not after conventional victory. He wants to unmask hypocrisy, to drag truth into the light in the cruelest ways possible. His threats are specific, timed, and broadcast for maximum impact. Citizens huddle in fear, officials scramble, and the vigilante realizes that fists and gadgets are useless against a man who thrives on spectacle. The city falls into a rhythm of anticipation. Each day brings a new threat, a new test. Judges are killed, policemen betrayed, ordinary citizens terrorized. The villain orchestrates these acts not merely to harm but to expose. He wants the city to see its fragility, to understand that law is only as strong as the fear that sustains it. His greatest weapon is not explosives or knives, it is philosophy. He laughs at order, mocks morality, and forces those who oppose him to break their own rules. The vigilante attempts to counter him with alliances. He collaborates with the police commissioner, one of the few men in uniform who still believes in integrity, and together they weave strategies to trap the enemy. Yet even these plans crumble under the anarchist's unpredictability. Every attempt to anticipate his moves is met with inversion. Every trap set for him becomes a trap for those who laid it. The sense of futility grows, and with it, the atmosphere of dread. The district attorney, meanwhile, continues his crusade against the mob, earning admiration from the public and deepening his relationship with the woman caught between him and the vigilante. His rise is meteoric, his speeches filled with conviction, his face glowing with promise. He becomes the city's white knight, the symbol of what legitimate justice might look like. And yet, even as his star rises, the anarchist watches him closely, recognizing him as the perfect pawn. To break the city's spirit, one must corrupt its most incorruptible symbol. Tension builds toward a confrontation that crackles with inevitability. The vigilante and the anarchist finally collide in physical proximity during an attempted assassination of a public figure. The chaos is staged with operatic scale. Costumes, disguises, ordinary people manipulated into playing roles in a macabre performance. The vigilante disrupts the plan, saving lives, but at great cost. What makes these developments so unsettling is the way they spiral outward. Every attempt to restore stability results in greater instability. Every victory feels hollow, every arrest temporary. The villain is not interested in winning in conventional terms. He is interested in pulling back the curtain, in proving that morality and justice are fragile illusions. And slowly, piece by piece, he begins to succeed. One of the most harrowing developments arrives when he escalates from officials to civilians, declaring that the entire city is now part of his game. His threats grow more sadistic, his riddles more elaborate. Explosions rip through the city, murders are filmed like performances, and the public begins to lose faith not only in institutions but in the vigilante himself. Citizens ask whether his very existence provoked this madness, whether the mask meant to inspire fear in criminals has instead invited chaos into their lives. The hero becomes complicit in the villain's performance, his symbol tainted by unintended consequences. As the story barrels forward, the vigilante faces choices that grow increasingly impossible. Does he reveal his identity to stop the killings? Does he sacrifice his principles to end the terror? Does he allow an innocent to suffer so that a greater number might survive? These are not just tactical decisions but moral crucibles, designed by the villain to prove that even the noblest figure can be broken. The audience watches with unease, realizing that the questions being asked are not just about the city on screen but about themselves, about the fragility of their own moral codes under pressure. The first half of the narrative closes on a note of dread, not triumph. The city is unraveling, the vigilante is exhausted, the district attorney is being drawn ever deeper into the web, and the woman who ties them together is caught in a storm she cannot escape. The anarchist, laughing in shadows, seems not merely an antagonist but a prophet of destruction, dragging the city toward revelations it does not want. What began with a bank robbery has expanded into an existential crisis, and the sense of inevitability tightens with every scene. The audience leans forward, knowing the storm has only begun. The story turns darker with a swiftness that feels almost inevitable, as though the city itself has been dragged into a spiral from which it cannot recover. What was once a game of threats and spectacles becomes a full descent into chaos, where every rule is overturned and every choice carries unbearable weight. The clown-faced anarchist no longer seems like an intruder but the architect of the city's destiny, manipulating every player on the board until even the strongest begin to falter. The tone shifts from uneasy suspense to suffocating dread, as though the walls are closing in, not just on the characters but on the audience itself. The vigilante finds himself cornered in ways he has never experienced. For years he has defined himself by control, his ability to anticipate, to outmaneuver, to impose fear on those who hide in shadows. But now, against an enemy who thrives on unpredictability, every strength becomes weakness. The anarchist does not want money or territory. He wants collapse, and collapse cannot be fought with gadgets or fists. The vigilante's mask begins to feel less like armor and more like a prison, isolating him from the very people he wishes to protect. In quiet moments, he stares at his reflection, asking himself if he has already become what the villain insists he is. A destabilizing force, the spark that ignited the very chaos now consuming the city. The district attorney, once the golden symbol of hope, begins his own unraveling. His faith in justice is tested brutally when he and the woman who embodies his love for a better life are captured in a meticulously orchestrated scheme. The anarchist arranges them as pawns in his cruel game, each placed in separate locations rigged to explode, each given only minutes of borrowed time. The vigilante races to the rescue, his decision guided not just by strategy but by longing, by the desperate need to save the woman who carries his last hope for a life beyond the mask. Yet the villain has already anticipated this choice, has already inverted the coordinates, so that when the vigilante arrives, he finds not his beloved but the district attorney, scarred by fire, shattered both physically and spiritually. Meanwhile, the woman he loves is gone, consumed in an inferno that leaves nothing but ash. This is the turning point, the wound that cannot heal. The vigilante staggers under the weight of failure, while the district attorney's soul curdles into bitterness. What was once incorruptible begins to rot, as grief transforms into rage, and rage into a hunger for vengeance. Half his face burned away, his moral compass collapses, and he begins a descent that is as tragic as it is inevitable. He becomes the embodiment of duality, half man, half monster, half justice, half vengeance. His coin flips deciding the fates of those who once trusted him. The audience watches in horror, not because the transformation is sudden, but because it feels like destiny finally claiming its due. Meanwhile, the anarchist escalates his campaign of terror. He pushes beyond targeted assassinations and begins playing with the city itself, orchestrating scenarios designed to turn ordinary citizens into participants in his philosophy. The most harrowing of these unfolds on the river, where two ferries, one packed with civilians, the other with prisoners, are wired with explosives. Each vessel holds the detonator to the other, and the ultimatum is clear. Choose to destroy the other or be destroyed yourselves. It is a cruel experiment, a live demonstration of his thesis that when stripped of illusions, humanity will always choose self-preservation, that morality is a mask as fragile as the vigilante's cowl. The sequence is unbearable in its tension. Passengers scream, argue, plead. Prisoners demand survival, civilians insist on their innocence, captains struggle to maintain order. Time ticks away, and the city itself feels balanced on the edge of the detonator. Yet the twist lies in refusal. Neither ferry chooses to act, and in their collective hesitation lies a flicker of hope, a suggestion that humanity can resist descent into chaos. The anarchist's experiment, designed to prove corruption universal, fails. Yet even in failure, his laughter echoes, because the damage has already been done elsewhere. The vigilante finally corners him in a skyscraper teetering on the edge of collapse. Their confrontation is physical but also symbolic. Strength against madness, control against chaos. The villain fights not to win but to prove a point, that deep down everyone is like him, that morality is a joke waiting to collapse under pressure. When the vigilante overpowers him and leaves him hanging from a wire above the abyss, the expected resolution never comes. The anarchist does not beg, does not fear, but laughs. He insists the battle is already lost, because the true fall has already happened. Not his, but the district attorney's. And here, the story reveals its cruelest twist. The real victory of chaos was never in bombs or deaths, but in the corruption of the city's shining symbol. The district attorney, now fully transformed, embarks on a spree of vengeance, flipping his coin to decide the fates of those he blames for his loss. Corrupt officers, mobsters, even allies find themselves at the mercy of chance. He no longer believes in justice, only in balance, in randomness that reflects his broken worldview. His descent is filmed with tragic intensity, the man who once embodied hope now reduced to a monster indistinguishable from the criminals he once fought. For the vigilante, this revelation is more devastating than any battle with the anarchist, because it proves the villain's thesis. Even the best can fall, and when they do, they drag everyone else with them. The climax arrives not with explosions but with heartbreak. The district attorney kidnaps the commissioner's family, determined to make him suffer the same agony he endured. In a ruined building, half in shadow, he holds a gun, flipping his coin to decide who lives and who dies. The vigilante arrives, pleading, fighting, desperate to pull him back from the brink. The scene is tense, intimate, stripped of spectacle. Here, it is not gadgets or brawls that matter, but the raw confrontation of ideals. Vengeance against justice, despair against hope. When the coin falls, chaos seems poised to triumph. Yet in the struggle that follows, the vigilante manages to save the commissioner's family, though not without cost. The district attorney falls, broken, his body as shattered as his soul. And then comes the resolution that cuts deeper than any wound. The vigilante realizes that the truth cannot be allowed to stand. If the city learns that its white knight fell into monstrosity, hope itself will die. The villain may be defeated, but his philosophy will live on if the people lose faith in justice. So the vigilante makes his greatest sacrifice. He takes the blame. He becomes the villain, the hunted, the scapegoat. He allows the district attorney to remain in public memory as a hero, untarnished, even as his own reputation crumbles. The police hunt him, the people curse him, and he flees into the shadows, not as savior but as outcast. The final images are haunting. The commissioner explains the lie to his son, insisting that sometimes truth must be buried for hope to survive. The vigilante rides into the night, pursued like prey, his cape billowing behind him not as a symbol of triumph but as a shroud of exile. The voiceover declares him not a hero but something more complicated, something more tragic. He becomes the figure the city needs, not the one it wants. The bearer of its sins, the guardian of its illusions, the sacrifice upon which its fragile order can rest. The second half of the story is a spiral into moral ambiguity, where victories taste like ashes and heroism is redefined as self-destruction. It is a descent that never truly climbs back, because the questions it raises linger long after the credits roll. What is justice, if built on lies? What is heroism, if it demands the annihilation of the self? What is hope, if sustained by myth rather than truth? These are the questions that echo in the silence after the final chase, questions that turn a tale of masked heroes and painted villains into one of the most profound meditations on morality in modern cinema. And when the lights come up, you sit there, breathless, unsettled, carrying not the comfort of resolution but the weight of paradox. Because the story does not end with victory. It ends with sacrifice, with exile, with a city saved yet broken, with a hero who has won nothing except the burden of bearing everyone else's sins. And perhaps that is why it lingers, because it insists that true heroism is not about glory but about loss, not about standing in the light but about choosing the darkness so others may go on believing in something brighter. The faces that populate this story are more than characters. They are archetypes reshaped into something painfully human, each one carrying the weight of a philosophy, each one bending under the contradictions of their own choices. To analyze them is to unspool threads of identity, morality, and power until the entire narrative reveals itself less as a battle of fists and weapons and more as a conflict of ideals embodied in flesh and blood. They are not simply players in a drama. They are walking contradictions, mirrors of ourselves, stripped bare by circumstance. At the heart stands the vigilante, cloaked in shadow, armored in steel, defined not by who he is but by what he has chosen to become. The mask is his true face, the billionaire persona his disguise, and in that inversion lies the first paradox. He is a man who believes in control, who uses fear as a weapon against those who prey on the weak. His gadgets, his martial prowess, his relentless discipline, all stem from an obsession born of trauma, a vow whispered over the graves of his parents that he would never again allow the city to sink into the chaos that claimed them. Yet the very existence of his symbol provokes escalation. His enemies rise to meet him, adapting to his methods, mocking his ideals. He is caught in a vicious cycle where his strength breeds stronger foes, where every victory births new threats. His greatest fear is not death, but irrelevance, that his war is unwinnable, that his presence makes things worse. The tragedy of his character is that he understands this truth and continues anyway, bearing the burden of futility because the alternative is surrender. The brilliance of the character design is that none are purely good or purely evil. Each exists in tension, pulled between ideals and desires, strengths and flaws. The vigilante is noble but obsessive, heroic but culpable. The district attorney is righteous but brittle, inspiring but vengeful. The anarchist is monstrous but lucid, terrifying but honest in his nihilism. The commissioner is dutiful but compromised, wise but weary. The butler is loyal but paternalistic, merciful but deceptive. Even the woman, often dismissed as secondary, is complex, choosing a future with one man while still loving another, embodying the impossibility of reconciling shadow and light. In the end, the characters are the story. The explosions, the battles, the heists, these are spectacles, but they matter only because of the people who endure them, the choices they make, the ideals they betray or defend. To watch them is to see philosophies embodied, to witness morality tested in fire. They are mirrors of ourselves, stripped of illusions, forced into choices we pray we will never face. And it is this humanity, fragile and fractured, that makes them unforgettable. Because when the credits roll, we do not carry with us only the images of trucks flipping or buildings burning. We carry the haunted stare of a man who chooses exile over glory. We carry the scarred face of a fallen knight who once embodied hope. We carry the laughter of a villain who insists that truth is chaos. We carry the quiet endurance of a commissioner who chooses myth over honesty, the steady loyalty of a butler who knows love sometimes requires lies, the memory of a woman torn between two impossible choices. These are the faces that linger, the contradictions that echo. They remind us that heroism and villainy are not absolutes but fragile constructs, that love and vengeance are separated by a line as thin as a coin's edge, that hope is sustained not by truth but by belief. And perhaps that is why this story resonates so deeply. Its characters are not simply written, they are carved from contradictions, scarred by choices, haunted by philosophies. They are us, magnified and laid bare, struggling to navigate a world where every principle can fracture under pressure, where every mask hides a truth too painful to reveal. They force us to confront the uncomfortable reality that morality is not a fixed star but a fragile flame, flickering in the wind of chaos, sustained only by those willing to bear its cost. The making of this film has taken on a mythology of its own, a story told in half-whispered anecdotes and curious details that cling to it like shadows. What unfolded behind the camera was not merely routine production but a journey haunted by accidents, uncanny coincidences, and decisions that would shape not only the movie but the way people talk about filmmaking itself. To revisit these strangest facts is to peel back another layer, revealing how fragile and unpredictable the process can be, even when helmed by meticulous planning and extraordinary talent. It begins with the casting of the anarchist in clown makeup, a decision that even at the time felt like a gamble. When the actor was first announced, many doubted the choice, believing his past roles offered no evidence that he could embody madness with conviction. Yet he threw himself into preparation with unsettling intensity, locking himself away in a hotel room for weeks, filling notebooks with fragments of dialogue, twisted philosophies, and sketches of symbols. He experimented with voice and posture until he found something that unsettled even him. One of the strangest details. He would smear makeup himself rather than relying on professionals, arguing that the character would never apply it neatly. The result was a look that shifted subtly from scene to scene, as though the paint itself was alive, degrading and reforming with his mood. Crew members confessed they never knew what version of him would step on set each day, and that unpredictability bled into the performance. There was also the uncanny improvisation that bled into some of the most iconic moments. One infamous example is the hospital scene, where the anarchist shuffles out in disguise, detonator in hand, pressing the trigger as explosions tear through the building. In reality, the pyrotechnics malfunctioned, the sequence of detonations stalled. Rather than breaking character, the actor fiddled with the detonator, smacking it with irritation, and his comic frustration became part of the scene. The delay heightened the tension, made the moment funnier, stranger, more unsettling. What could have been a ruined take instead became a legendary moment of spontaneity, preserved forever because an actor refused to let the illusion collapse. The film's dedication to realism often created unusual challenges. The director famously insisted on using practical effects rather than relying on computer-generated imagery. When a massive truck flips end over end in the middle of the city, the spectacle was achieved not by trickery but by actually flipping a full-size vehicle. Engineers devised a piston system powerful enough to launch tons of metal into the air, rehearsed it meticulously, and executed the stunt on a closed street in Chicago. The danger was real. Had the timing been off, the destruction could have been catastrophic. But it worked, and the resulting shot carries an authenticity that no digital rendering could replicate. Crew members recall the ground shaking, the windows of nearby buildings rattling, the silence that fell afterward as everyone absorbed what they had just witnessed. Another curious fact lies in the IMAX technology used to capture many of the action sequences. This was the first major film to employ IMAX cameras for large-scale narrative filmmaking, and while the results are stunning, the process was fraught with difficulties. The cameras were enormous, heavy, and notoriously loud, so much so that actors often had to strain their voices during dialogue scenes. On one occasion, a camera reportedly broke during filming, its fragility at odds with the scale of the production. Yet the footage it captured, the dizzying views of cityscapes, the sense of immersion during chases, was so revolutionary that it altered the trajectory of blockbuster filmmaking forever. There were also accidents, some tragic, that cast a long shadow. During the shoot, a stunt technician lost his life in a car accident while preparing for an action sequence. The production pressed on, but the incident became a somber reminder of the risks involved in creating spectacle. The film's darkness seemed to bleed into its making, a reminder that the line between illusion and reality is perilously thin. The woman who holds his heart represents a possibility he cannot grasp, a life unmasked, unburdened. Her love for him is deep but conditional. She cannot reconcile the man she knew with the figure who stalks rooftops in the dead of night. For her, love requires truth, but truth is the one thing he cannot give. She is drawn instead to the district attorney, whose brightness contrasts with the vigilante's shadows, whose legitimacy offers the promise of change through law rather than fear. She becomes the thread tying them both together, not as an object of desire but as a symbol of choice. The life the vigilante longs for but cannot have, the hope the city needs but cannot sustain. Her eventual death is not just tragedy but metaphor, the severing of his last link to normalcy, the final reminder that sacrifice will define his path. The district attorney begins as a beacon, a man whose faith in justice feels unshakable. His charisma electrifies courtrooms, his fearlessness unsettles criminals, his incorruptibility makes him the people's champion. He is the one who can succeed where the vigilante cannot, precisely because he operates in the open. He is the city's white knight, sunlight to the vigilante's shadow. Yet it is this very incorruptibility that makes his fall so devastating. His scarring, both physical and psychological, marks the rupture of hope itself. Half his face destroyed, he becomes the embodiment of duality, justice on one side, vengeance on the other. The coin he flips becomes the cruelest of symbols, chance replacing morality, randomness supplanting justice. His transformation into a figure of terror is not sudden but tragically logical. Grief curdles into rage, and rage finds outlet in cruelty. He is proof of the anarchist's thesis, that even the noblest can fall, and when they do, their fall shakes everything built upon their integrity. And then there is the clown-faced anarchist, the specter who drags the city into madness. He is not a man in the conventional sense but a philosophy made flesh, a prophet of chaos whose only goal is to expose the fragility of order. He wears makeup not to conceal but to reveal, mocking the very idea of identity. His backstory shifts with every telling, sometimes tragic, sometimes absurd, because he knows origin stories are cages, and he refuses to be confined by one. His genius lies not in strength but in unpredictability. He robs banks not for money but to humiliate institutions. He kills not for gain but to prove that morality is a joke. He engineers spectacles designed to force his enemies into impossible choices, exposing hypocrisy and weakness. What makes him terrifying is not that he is insane, but that he is clear-eyed in his nihilism. He believes society is a thin veneer, that under pressure, every human will reveal their monstrous nature. His laughter, his cruelty, his theatrics, all serve this singular mission, to prove that chaos is the only truth. He is villain and philosopher, trickster and executioner, mirror and mockery. The police commissioner occupies a quieter role but one of profound importance. He is weary yet steadfast, a man who believes in the law even as he recognizes its corruption. His alliance with the vigilante is pragmatic but also deeply moral. He understands that extraordinary times demand extraordinary measures, even if they compromise the purity of justice. He is caught between loyalty to institutions and loyalty to truth, between his public duty and his private knowledge. His interactions with his family reveal his humanity, his vulnerability, his quiet fear that his children may inherit the world's rot. When he chooses to protect the myth of the district attorney's incorruptibility, it is not out of cowardice but out of necessity. He sacrifices truth to preserve hope, knowing the cost, bearing the guilt. His character embodies the theme of compromise, what must be sacrificed to keep society intact. The mobsters who once ruled the city serve as remnants of an old order. They are dangerous, ruthless, but predictable. Their rules are clear: money, power, hierarchy. In comparison to the anarchist, they seem almost quaint, relics of a world where crime still obeyed logic. Their downfall at his hands symbolizes the shift from order to chaos, from systems to entropy. They remind us that the city's corruption is not new, but their irrelevance proves that the true danger lies not in familiar evil but in the unpredictable madness that arises when systems fail. Even the secondary characters carry thematic weight. The loyal butler, who raised the vigilante after tragedy, embodies the voice of conscience. He is both caretaker and critic, loving yet unsparing. He warns of escalation, counsels restraint, and speaks the truths the vigilante cannot admit to himself. His presence grounds the story in humanity, reminding us that beneath the mask is a man still capable of doubt, still yearning for comfort. When he burns the letter that would have revealed the woman's choice, it is not out of dishonesty but out of mercy, shielding the vigilante from a truth that would have destroyed him further. His character symbolizes loyalty tempered by wisdom, a reminder that even heroes need caretakers. The boardroom executives and opportunists who orbit the vigilante's civilian persona represent another facet of society: the greed and ambition that thrive even in chaos. They are quick to exploit, quicker to betray, and their cowardice contrasts sharply with the vigilante's sacrifices. One young executive, who uncovers the vigilante's identity, threatens to expose him not out of principle but out of opportunism, seeking profit from revelation. His subplot is small but telling. It underscores the idea that corruption is not limited to criminals in alleys but exists equally in corporate towers, that cowardice and greed are as destabilizing as violence. Each character, from the most central to the most peripheral, embodies a fragment of the film's philosophical tapestry. Together, they create a chorus of contradictions. The vigilante believes in control yet provokes chaos. The woman embodies love but becomes collateral in war. The district attorney embodies hope but collapses into vengeance. The anarchist mocks morality yet forces everyone else to define theirs. The commissioner sacrifices truth for survival. The butler chooses mercy over honesty. The mobsters cling to order even as chaos overtakes them. The opportunists thrive in shadows of legality, proving corruption seeps everywhere. The interactions between these characters deepen the resonance. The vigilante's clash with the anarchist is not merely physical but ideological: control against entropy. His rivalry with the district attorney is not just about love but about legitimacy, shadow against sunlight. His partnership with the commissioner is built on trust but strained by compromise. His bond with the butler is familial but tested by painful truths. Each relationship is both personal and symbolic, each dialogue layered with subtext. One of the strangest bits of trivia involves the viral marketing campaign launched before the film's release. Months ahead of the premiere, websites appeared online as if created by the anarchist himself, inviting fans to participate in scavenger hunts, decode riddles, and uncover hidden messages. Bakeries across the United States delivered cakes with phones baked inside, buzzing ominously to announce the next clue. Public spaces were defaced with the villain's symbol, not by vandals but by coordinated campaigns that blurred fiction and reality. It was an experiment in immersive storytelling, one that transformed ordinary fans into participants in the chaos long before the film hit theaters. Even costumes carried odd stories. The anarchist's suit, for instance, was deliberately distressed by the wardrobe team. Instead of keeping it clean between takes, they crumpled it, rubbed it with dirt, even slept in it to make it look lived in. It became a symbol not of glamour but of decay, a parody of the sharp suits worn by mob bosses. Meanwhile, the Vigilante's suit underwent its own strange evolution. The new design allowed for greater flexibility, but the cowl restricted vision so severely that the actor often stumbled during stunts. To compensate, fight choreography was adjusted to suit the limitations, lending the combat a strange, almost improvisational rhythm. There is also the story of the interrogation scene, filmed with a rawness that unsettled even the crew. The director encouraged the actors to push the boundaries, to let the violence feel uncontrolled. The Vigilante's fists slammed against the table, the anarchists' laughter rang out, and what unfolded felt less like acting and more like collapse. When the cameras cut, silence lingered, crew members shaken by the intensity. One anecdote claims that furniture on set cracked from the force of the blows, yet the actors continued without breaking character, lost in the vortex of performance. Not all strangeness was dark. There was humor too, often born from the intensity of the material. Between takes, the anarchist would sometimes break into absurd dances or tell jokes in his sinister voice, leaving crew members torn between laughter and unease. The actor behind the district attorney was known for lightening the mood with pranks, sneaking props into scenes or delivering lines with exaggerated flourish during rehearsals. These moments of levity were essential, a counterweight to the gravity of the narrative. The film's score also carried peculiar details. The composer designed the anarchist's theme around a single note, stretched and distorted until it felt like a blade scraping against metal. The sound is almost unbearable, a shrill hum that rises with tension, designed to unsettle rather than entertain. To achieve it, the composer experimented with unconventional instruments, even using razor blades against strings. Audiences may not consciously notice the sound, but its presence gnaws at the subconscious, making every appearance of the villain feel like an assault. Perhaps the strangest fact of all is how the film's impact seemed to transcend itself. The performance of the anarchist became so iconic that it reshaped the cultural imagination of villains. Fans mimicked his voice, his makeup, his philosophy, sometimes in unsettling ways. News reports emerged of crimes inspired by his chaos, a grim testament to how fiction can bleed into reality. The role consumed its actor, and after his tragic death before the film's release, the performance took on an almost mythic quality. Every gesture, every line, every cackle became not only entertainment but elegy, a reminder of how far an artist can push himself into a role and the cost such intensity may carry. The reception of the film only deepened its mythology. Critics marveled at its ambition, audiences packed theaters in record numbers, and debates raged about its meaning. Was it an allegory for terrorism in a post-9/11 world? A reflection on surveillance and the erosion of privacy? A study in duality and sacrifice? The questions multiplied, and the film seemed to grow larger than itself, less a movie and more a cultural event. Looking back, the strangest facts about its making are not simply curiosities but part of its aura. The malfunctioning explosives that turned into genius improvisation, the practical stunts that risked real danger, the viral campaigns that blurred fiction and reality, the costumes dirted by hand, the soundtracks built on dissonance, the performances so raw they unsettled even those who witnessed them live. These details remind us that cinema is never clean, never predictable. It is messy, dangerous, unpredictable, and sometimes haunted. And perhaps that is why this film endures not only as a work of art but as a legend. Its story was told not just on screen but in the making itself, in the risks taken, the accidents transformed into brilliance, the strange echoes of reality that seeped into fiction. To watch it is to see not only a narrative about chaos and order but a reflection of the chaos and order that governed its creation. That is its truest strangeness, that it became the very thing it depicted, a fragile dance between control and unpredictability, a film forever haunted by the uncanny, the tragic, and the unforgettable. To step back from the spectacle and look closely at the events that shape this story is to realize that its narrative beats are less about plot mechanics than they are about ideas being tested under fire. Every major moment is constructed as a kind of philosophical provocation, a challenge to characters and audiences alike. What do you believe about justice, morality, or human nature, and what happens when those beliefs collapse under pressure? In examining these events critically, one discovers that they are not simply entertainment but parables, echoes of deeper anxieties that define their cultural moment and continue to resonate. The opening bank heist immediately announces this intent. At first, it seems like a standard set piece. Masked criminals carrying out a meticulously choreographed robbery. But then the betrayals begin. Each man eliminates the one beside him, reducing the crew until only one remains. This structure reflects not only ruthlessness but also an ethos. Greed devours itself, alliances are illusions, chaos rules even among those who plan with precision. From a critical standpoint, this opening works as thesis statement. It demonstrates in miniature the philosophy of the villain. Systems collapse when self-interest overtakes loyalty, and all order is temporary. The fact that this event is rendered with such cool detachment, filmed against the impersonal facades of gleaming skyscrapers, adds another layer. The city is complicit, the architecture itself sterile, indifferent to blood spilled in its shadow. Critics have often noted how the scene embodies post-9/11 paranoia. The fear of an enemy that hides behind masks, strikes unpredictably, and thrives on spectacle. Another pivotal event unfolds in the early confrontation between the vigilante, the mob, and the anarchist who proposes to eliminate their masked problem for them. In traditional crime sagas, this would be a meeting of business, a negotiation of power. Here, it becomes theater, punctuated by sleight of hand and a grotesque demonstration of violence. The anarchist's magic trick, vanishing a pencil in a man's skull, is both shocking and symbolic. It reduces brutality to performance, mocks the idea of business as usual. The opening bank heist immediately announces this intent. At first, it seems like a standard set piece. Masked criminals carrying out a meticulously choreographed robbery. But then the betrayals begin. Each man eliminates the one beside him, reducing the crew until only one remains. This structure reflects not only ruthlessness but also an ethos. Greed devours itself, alliances are illusions, chaos rules even among those who plan with precision. From a critical standpoint, this opening works as thesis statement. It demonstrates in miniature the philosophy of the villain. Systems collapse when self-interest overtakes loyalty, and all order is temporary. The fact that this event is rendered with such cool detachment, filmed against the impersonal facades of gleaming skyscrapers, adds another layer. The city is complicit, the architecture itself sterile, indifferent to blood spilled in its shadow. Critics have often noted how the scene embodies post-9/11 paranoia. The fear of an enemy that hides behind masks, strikes unpredictably, and thrives on spectacle. Another pivotal event unfolds in the early confrontation between the vigilante, the mob, and the anarchist who proposes to eliminate their masked problem for them. In traditional crime sagas, this would be a meeting of business, a negotiation of power. Here, it becomes theater, punctuated by sleight of hand and a grotesque demonstration of violence. The anarchist's magic trick, vanishing a pencil in a man's skull, is both shocking and symbolic. It reduces brutality to performance, mocks the idea of business as usual, and forces everyone in the room to recognize that logic cannot contain him. From a critical perspective, this scene destabilizes genre expectations. The mobsters represent the old order, predictable corruption, transactional evil, while the newcomer embodies something more existential, chaos that refuses rational containment. The audience, like the mobsters, feels the shift, understanding that familiar tropes will no longer apply. The love triangle woven between the vigilante, his childhood friend, and the district attorney carries its own weight of symbolism. Their interactions are not merely romantic subplots but philosophical debates embodied in human desire. She represents the life the vigilante longs for but cannot have, a future unmasked, free of duty. The district attorney represents legitimate justice, hope through institutions rather than fear. Together, they form a trinity of conflicting ideals: personal happiness, lawful order, and vigilante necessity. Their shared moments, quiet conversations, glances filled with longing, promises unfulfilled, are imbued with the weight of impossible choice. Critics often emphasize how these interactions ground the narrative in emotional realism, making the eventual tragedies resonate all the more. The love story is not saccharine but tragic inevitability. No matter the choice, loss will follow. One of the most critically examined events is the interrogation scene. It functions less as a plot point than as a philosophical duel. In the sterile brightness of the room, two ideologies collide. Control versus chaos, justice versus mockery. The vigilante unleashes physical violence, pounding fists into flesh, while the anarchist laughs, immune to pain, feeding on the frustration. From a narrative perspective, this event exposes the futility of brute force against nihilism. Critically, it becomes a commentary on the post-9/11 war on terror, where traditional methods of interrogation proved useless against enemies who sought not survival but spectacle. The anarchist thrives precisely because he has no stake in survival, no fear of consequence. The scene's impact lies in its inversion of power. Though chained, the villain dominates, forcing the hero to realize that his methods cannot win. This revelation reverberates beyond the room, unsettling audiences by suggesting that control itself is an illusion when faced with chaos unbound. The dual kidnapping of the district attorney and the woman who ties them all together marks the narrative's cruelest twist. This event crystallizes the villain's philosophy, forcing the vigilante into a moral trap. He can save one, but not both. The fact that the anarchist lies about the locations adds another layer of sadism, ensuring that even choice itself is corrupted. From a critical perspective, this moment embodies the concept of the no-win scenario, a narrative device that exposes the inadequacy of moral codes under extreme pressure. The vigilante, driven by love, races to save her, only to find the man he least wanted to rescue. Her death and his survival invert hope into despair, transforming the district attorney into a scarred figure of vengeance. This event is not just tragedy, it is philosophy enacted, that attempts to preserve order will always breed greater disorder, that even noble intentions can be manipulated into instruments of destruction. The transformation of the district attorney into a figure of vengeance is perhaps the most thematically potent arc in the film. His scarring is literal, but its significance is symbolic. The duality of man laid bare, justice and vengeance occupying the same face. The coin he once used as token of luck becomes instrument of fate, its flips determining life and death. Critics have long seen him as the film's true tragedy, the fall of the White Knight whose incorruptibility was meant to redeem the city. His descent affirms the anarchist's worldview, that even the purest can be broken, that morality is fragile under grief. The resonance here is profound. Audiences mourn not only a man but an ideal. His fall represents the collapse of faith in institutions, in the possibility of untainted justice. The emotional weight of his arc transforms the film from superhero spectacle into tragedy worthy of Shakespeare. Another critical event is the ferry sequence, one of the most audacious moral experiments in mainstream cinema. Two boats, one filled with civilians, the other with prisoners, are given detonators to destroy each other. Time ticks away, and chaos hovers. The anarchist insists that self-preservation will triumph, that fear will strip away morality. And yet, neither ferry acts. The civilians hesitate, racked by guilt, unable to stain themselves with murder. The prisoners, led by a man who seizes the detonator only to throw it overboard, refuse the logic of survival through destruction. This event, from a critical viewpoint, is the narrative's counterpoint to despair. It suggests that even in the darkest circumstances, humanity retains the capacity for compassion, that the anarchist's philosophy is not absolute. The tension of the sequence is unbearable, but its resolution offers a fragile. The climactic confrontation between vigilante and anarchist in the skyscraper is symbolic culmination. Suspended above the abyss, the villain laughs even as he dangles in defeat. He does not beg, does not fear, but revels in the chaos he has unleashed. Critically, this event refuses catharsis. The villain's physical defeat means little because his ideological victory has already been secured. He has corrupted the city's White Knight, exposed the fragility of institutions, and force the vigilante into impossible choices. His final laughter echoes with truth. Even in failure, he has won. This inversion of the typical climactic battle unsettles audiences, leaving them with ambiguity rather than resolution. The resolution of the district attorney's arc, with his death in a ruined building and the vigilante's decision to take the blame, is the story's final, devastating twist. Here, the film embraces the theme of myth over truth. To preserve hope, the commissioner agrees to conceal the reality, allowing the fallen knight to remain untarnished in memory. The vigilante accepts the role of villain, hunted and despised, bearing sins that are not his. From a critical standpoint, this event interrogates the very concept of heroism. Is a hero defined by truth or by necessity? Can justice survive if it is built on lies? The ending offers no comfort, only paradox. The vigilante becomes exile, scapegoat, burden-bearer. The city is saved, but only through deception. The audience leaves unsettled, carrying the weight of moral ambiguity rather than triumph. Taken together, these events construct a tapestry of themes: chaos versus order, truth versus illusion, justice versus vengeance. Each event is crafted to destabilize assumptions, to force audiences into uncomfortable questions. Critics have argued that the film reflects the anxieties of its time: terrorism, surveillance, corruption, the fragility of institutions. But its resonance extends beyond any single era. It is a story about the human condition, about the contradictions we all live with, our longing for justice, our susceptibility to fear, our capacity for both cruelty and compassion. The emotional resonance of these events lies in their refusal to simplify. The love story ends not with fulfillment but with death. The incorruptible hero becomes corrupted. The villain loses but laughs in victory. The vigilante saves the city but loses its faith. Each event subverts expectation, denying the comfort of resolution. This is why the film lingers, not because of its spectacle, but because of its moral weight. It refuses to let us escape with easy answers. Critically, the impact of these events reshaped the genre itself. Audiences accustomed to superhero tales of triumph were confronted with tragedy, ambiguity, and philosophical depth. The reception was electric: praise for its ambition, debates about its meaning, comparisons to literary tragedy and political allegory. It became more than a film. It became a cultural mirror, reflecting fears and hopes alike. In the end, the events of the story function not only as narrative milestones but as parables, allegories of human fragility. They remind us that order is fragile, that morality is tested in crisis, that heroism is as much burden as glory. They leave us haunted because they refuse resolution, because they echo truths we recognize in our own lives. And that, perhaps, is the deepest critical perspective: that this is not a story about masked figures in a fictional city, but about us, our fears, our contradictions, our fragile hope that in the face of chaos, we might still choose compassion. The creation of this film was itself a kind of drama, as layered and unpredictable as the story that finally unspooled on screen. What the audience sees is polished, tightly woven, deliberate, but what unfolded behind the cameras was something rawer, stranger, filled with unexpected discoveries, accidents that turned into blessings, and choices that could have toppled everything had they gone differently. To explore the production is to peel back the curtain and realize that what seems inevitable in the finished product was anything but certain during its making. From the earliest planning stages, the director insisted on grounding the film in reality as much as possible. He wanted to capture the grit of a living city, to film not on soundstages filled with artificial backdrops but in the arteries of real streets, where glass skyscrapers loomed above, where traffic hummed, where the air carried the weight of urban life. Chicago became Gotham, and crews transformed its downtown corridors into stages for epic confrontations. Filming in such a bustling environment brought complications. Commuters grumbled as roads were shut down for night shoots, helicopters hovered dangerously close to towers, and crowds gathered by the hundreds just to glimpse explosions or the sight of a man in cape and cowl. Police were enlisted to maintain order, but even then, locals sometimes slipped into the frame, gawking, waving, unintentionally immortalized in scenes meant to evoke anonymity. The city itself became an uncredited character, as unpredictable as any actor. One of the most astonishing feats of production was the flipping of a semi-truck in the middle of downtown. The director rejected digital trickery, demanding that the stunt be done practically. Engineers worked for months to devise a hydraulic piston powerful enough to launch the multi-ton vehicle onto its nose, sending it somersaulting through the air before it crashed in a controlled arc. The margin of error was razor-thin. A miscalculation could have destroyed buildings, injured crew, or reduced the set to chaos. When the day came, nerves were taut. The piston fired, the truck flipped, and the ground shook as though the city itself had been struck. Crew members erupted in cheers, not only because the stunt succeeded but because they knew they had captured something that audiences would never forget. That moment, later immortalized on screen, carries with it the authenticity of risk, the thrill of reality bending under human ingenuity. The decision to film major sequences with IMAX cameras added another layer of complexity. At the time, this was uncharted territory. IMAX cameras were massive, unwieldy beasts, designed for documentaries, not frenetic action films. They were so heavy that operators often required cranes or rigs just to maneuver them. Their mechanical whirring was so loud that recording dialogue alongside them was nearly impossible, forcing actors to project their voices or rely on post-production adjustments. On more than one occasion, the cameras broke under strain, their delicate mechanisms unable to withstand the punishment of stunts. Yet the gamble paid off. The cityscapes appeared larger than life, the chase sequences immersive, the explosions terrifyingly real. Audiences gasped not only at the scale but at the intimacy, the sense of being pulled into the heart of chaos. The crew often joked that they were making two films simultaneously, one in standard format and one for a future where screens might stretch high above heads. The costumes carried their own share of peculiarities. The vigilante's suit, redesigned from its predecessor, offered greater flexibility, with separated plating that allowed for quicker movement. But the new cowl, though sleeker, severely restricted peripheral vision. The actor admitted to stumbling in fight sequences, unable to see opponents coming from the side. Choreographers adjusted the staging, using the limitations to shape a combat style that looked both brutal and desperate, as though the character relied on raw instinct rather than perfect awareness. Meanwhile, the anarchist's suit was treated with deliberate carelessness. The wardrobe team intentionally crumpled it, rubbed it with dirt, even slept in it to achieve the look of a garment worn endlessly without regard for hygiene or formality. Every stitch was designed to mock the neatness of mob bosses in sharp suits. The actor, committed to immersion, refused to let the suit be cleaned, insisting that it retain its disheveled authenticity. Behind the camera, the atmosphere was charged with intensity, sometimes so much so that it unnerved the crew. The actor playing the anarchist disappeared into the role, speaking in voice, moving in character, scribbling notes in a journal filled with chaotic scrawls, fragments of dialogue, disturbing images. He locked himself away for weeks before shooting began, experimenting with laughs until he found one that unsettled him. On set, crew members described feeling genuine unease when he entered the frame, not because they doubted his professionalism but because his unpredictability blurred the line between acting and being. Some days he would burst into manic energy, improvising gestures that unsettled even veteran actors. Other days he would stand in silence, watching, his eyes piercing through makeup in ways that felt otherworldly. The performance was so consuming that it left traces not only on film but on everyone who witnessed it. Not all production stories were grim. Humor often punctuated the intensity, offering relief to cast and crew. The actor portraying the district attorney was notorious for pranks, sneaking silly props into rehearsals, or delivering lines with exaggerated melodrama during downtime. The actor behind the vigilante, usually brooding in character, surprised everyone by joining in laughter between takes, his stern mask melting into warmth once the cameras stopped. Even the anarchist's performer, so unsettling on screen, found ways to amuse. At one point, during a long night shoot, he began dancing absurdly in full costume, twirling like a ballerina on the rain-slicked pavement, sending the crew into hysterics. These moments became essential, balancing the darkness of the story with reminders that they were, after all, making a movie. The score carried its own peculiar origins. The composer created the anarchist's theme using a single note stretched to unbearable length, layered with distorted sounds produced by unconventional instruments. Razor blades scraped against violin strings, metal warped until it screamed. The effect was less music than assault, a sound designed to make the audience physically uncomfortable, to feel as though chaos itself had entered the theater. Meanwhile, the Vigilante's theme was structured around steady, rhythmic build-ups, echoing both obsession and resolve. The collision of these motifs mirrored the narrative, order clashing with disorder, rhythm collapsing under discord. Marketing the film became a spectacle in its own right. Months before release, a viral campaign blurred the line between fiction and reality. Fans were drawn into scavenger hunts, piecing together puzzles that led them across cities. Cakes were delivered to bakeries with hidden cell phones inside, buzzing ominously to announce the next clue. Websites appeared, defaced with the anarchist's mocking smile, daring fans to decode messages. For many, the experience felt less like promotion and more like initiation into the chaos of the story itself. By the time the film premiered, audiences were already immersed in its philosophy, primed to see not just a movie but an event. There were darker shadows as well. A stunt technician tragically lost his life in an accident while preparing a sequence, a sobering reminder of the risks inherent in crafting spectacle. The crew carried on, but the loss lingered, casting a pall over the exhilaration of success. The tragedy underscored the thin line between illusion and danger, reminding everyone that the chaos on screen was built on the efforts and risks of real people. Editing the film presented its own labyrinth. Early cuts ran long, filled with moments of brilliance but too sprawling for coherence. Editors struggled with the balance between spectacle and intimacy, trimming scenes without losing weight. Some sequences were rearranged entirely, their rhythms altered to heighten tension. One editor later admitted that he lived with the sound of laughter in his head for months, hearing it even in silence, so deeply had the anarchist's presence seeped into his psyche. The editing room became another battleground, where chaos was tamed into narrative form. What emerged from these production choices was more than a film. It was an experience shaped by risk, improvisation, tragedy, and invention. The truck flip that could have failed, the IMAX cameras that broke under strain, the makeup applied with messy hands, the suit distressed with deliberate neglect, the score built on razor blades, all these elements became part of its DNA. The accidents that turned into genius, the pranks that relieved unbearable pressure, the viral campaigns that dissolved the line between audience and story, all contributed to the aura that surrounds it. Even years later, the anecdotes continue to circulate like folklore. Crew members still recall the ground trembling under the flipped truck, the eerie silence of the interrogation room, the absurd laughter of midnight dance rehearsals, the chilling hum of a single note in the score. Audiences remember not only the spectacle but the weight of its making, the sense that they were witnessing not just fiction but an artifact shaped by obsession, improvisation, and risk. In the end, the strangest truth about the production is how closely it mirrored the themes of the film itself. Control battled chaos every day on set. Plans derailed, accidents intervened, improvisations reshaped destiny. Order was carved from unpredictability, coherence from madness. Just as the narrative asked whether hope could survive under assault, the production asked whether artistry could emerge from risk. The answer, in both cases, was yes, but not without scars, not without strange echoes that linger. And perhaps that is why the film feels so alive, because it carries within it the chaos of its own creation, preserved in every frame like a heartbeat. The city looms over the story like a restless character, its steel bones and glass arteries shaping the drama as much as any villain or hero. Every shadowed alleyway, every gleaming skyscraper, every claustrophobic room becomes a stage where ideals clash and destinies unravel. The setting is not mere backdrop, it is a living organism, breathing with menace and hope, its architecture whispering of corruption, its streets echoing with despair, its lights flickering like fragile promises of order. To study the film's settings and cinematic elements is to recognize how deliberately crafted each space is, how every corner of the city reflects the moral ambiguities at the story's core. The opening heist situates us within the city's financial heart. Wide establishing shots capture towering facades of glass, pristine and sterile, symbols of wealth and control. Yet the serenity is fractured by the shattering of a window, by ropes strung taut across the abyss, by masked figures descending into chaos. The contrast between ordered architecture and anarchic intrusion sets the tone. Even the most fortified spaces are vulnerable. The camera lingers on geometric lines of the skyline, only to have them disrupted by erratic movements of clowns in masks. Here, cinematography reveals theme: the illusion of stability under constant threat from unpredictability. As the narrative unfolds, the city's duality becomes clearer. By day, sunlight spills across busy streets, illuminating bustling crowds, traffic jams, the hum of ordinary life. By night, the same streets transform into labyrinths of shadow, drenched in neon glow and fractured by flashing sirens. The camera shifts its language accordingly. Smooth, almost serene movements for daytime sequences, jittering handheld shots and canted angles for the nocturnal chaos. The city becomes Janus-faced, its brightness concealing its rot, its darkness amplifying its truth. Critics often remark on how Chicago, doubling as Gotham, feels both familiar and alien, recognizable as an American metropolis but heightened into myth by the way it is filmed. One of the most striking settings is the mob's meeting space, a high-rise with panoramic views of the skyline. The vast windows create frames within frames, the city stretching infinitely beyond the walls, a constant reminder of the scale of power at stake. When the anarchist interrupts this meeting, his disheveled presence against the sterile backdrop creates a visual clash. Chaos intruding upon order, grime against glass. The cinematography emphasizes this by pushing the camera uncomfortably close during his grotesque demonstration, then pulling back to reveal the mobsters dwarfed by the cityscape. The setting thus becomes metaphor. No matter how powerful these men believe themselves to be, they are mere figures against the sprawl of a city already slipping beyond their control. The vigilante's lair undergoes transformation as well. Gone is the Gothic cavern of earlier incarnations. Instead, he inhabits a stark, minimalist bunker: white walls, fluorescent lights, metal racks holding gadgets. The sterility of the space reflects his obsession with control, with stripping away excess in pursuit of function. Cinematography accentuates this by bathing the bunker in cold, clinical light, contrasting it with the chaos of the city outside. It is a setting that denies warmth, emphasizing isolation. The lair is not a home but a workspace, a surgical chamber where the man becomes masked, where identity is subsumed by mission. In critical terms, this space symbolizes the dehumanization inherent in his path. To fight monsters, he must strip away humanity until all that remains is machinery of vengeance. The district attorney, by contrast, operates within settings that radiate transparency and optimism. Courtrooms are filmed with warm lighting, wooden textures glowing, sunlight streaming through high windows. His offices are open, filled with glass and brightness, suggesting accessibility and honesty. Yet as the story progresses, these same spaces darken. Shadows creep into the courtroom, the warm tones desaturate, his office becomes cluttered and claustrophobic. Cinematography charts his transformation not only through performance but through setting itself. As he falls, his environment falls with him. By the time he lies in a hospital bed, half his face consumed by scar tissue, the sterile white walls around him feel less like refuge than tomb, amplifying the tragedy of a man once associated with light now engulfed in shadow. Few settings are as memorable as the interrogation room. Bright fluorescent lights hum overhead, reflecting off stark walls and metal tables. The absence of shadows creates an oppressive sterility, exposing every flaw, every twitch of muscle. Here, the setting functions as crucible. There is nowhere to hide, nothing to distract, only the raw clash of ideologies embodied in two figures, one cloaked in armor, the other in smeared makeup. The camera's choreography heightens this intensity. Close-ups capture sweat, spit, snarls, and laughter. Harsh lighting casts no mercy, making the violence feel uncomfortably real. This space, devoid of ornament, becomes one of the most memorable in the film precisely because it strips away spectacle and reveals the naked collision of philosophies. Hospitals, too, become significant symbolic spaces. Traditionally associated with healing, here they become sites of destruction. When the anarchist dons a nurse's uniform and strolls through sterile corridors, the contrast between costume and setting creates grotesque irony. Explosions rip through wards designed to save lives, a mockery of sanctity. Cinematography emphasizes the absurdity, lingering on the villain's casual shuffle against the backdrop of burning walls. The hospital becomes metaphor for corruption of ideals, places meant for salvation turned into theaters of cruelty. Prisons and police stations embody another layer of thematic weight. Cells and interrogation chambers symbolize institutions of justice, yet the anarchist manipulates them with ease, proving that bars and locks mean nothing to someone who thrives on chaos. When he escapes custody, the camera revels in the collapse of order. Shadows stretch long, alarms blare, fluorescent lights flicker. The police, meant to embody stability, are rendered powerless within their own fortress. This inversion, prison as site of liberation for the villain, underscores the fragility of institutions, making the audience question whether justice can ever truly be contained within walls. The ferry sequence introduces a radically different setting: water. The city's steel and concrete give way to open expanse, ferries drifting like islands of desperation. The interiors are cramped, filled with anxious crowds. The exteriors stretch into the vastness of dark water. Cinematography emphasizes isolation. Long shots show ferries as fragile specks against endless blackness. The setting enhances the moral dilemma. Surrounded by void, with no escape, the passengers must confront their own capacity for cruelty or compassion. The emptiness of the water becomes metaphor for the abyss of human nature, forcing reflection on whether survival instincts inevitably lead to violence. Skyscrapers dominate the visual landscape throughout the film, towering symbols of ambition, wealth, and fragility. They are not neutral, they become stages for battles, traps for hostages, symbols of vulnerability. When the final confrontation occurs in a half-constructed tower, girders exposed, windows unfinished, the symbolism is potent. The city's ambitions are incomplete, its foundations fragile, its future uncertain. Characters dangle above the abyss, their fates suspended as precariously as the structures themselves. Cinematography accentuates vertigo, wide shots emphasize dizzying heights, close-ups reveal beads of sweat, trembling hands gripping ropes. The unfinished skyscraper becomes the perfect metaphor, a city always building, never finished, perpetually vulnerable to collapse. Color and lighting are among the film's most powerful cinematic elements. Shadows dominate, swallowing characters into half-light, reflecting moral ambiguity. Warm tones are rare, reserved for fleeting moments of intimacy or hope. Candles flickering during private conversations, sunlight touching the woman's face as she contemplates a future denied her. More often, colors are desaturated, drained, reflecting corruption and despair. The anarchist's smeared makeup provides the brightest hues: green, red, white. Yet even these are grotesque, mocking vibrancy with decay. Lighting often fractures scenes into binaries. Half of a face illuminated, half obscured, mirroring the dualities that drive the story. Critics frequently cite the district attorney's scarred visage as literalization of this motif, but the theme is present throughout, embedded in cinematography as much as in character design. Sound design interacts intimately with setting. The city hums with ambient noise, sirens, horns, chatter, the mechanical grind of infrastructure. Yet during key moments, sound collapses into silence, amplifying tension. In the interrogation room, every thud of fist, every scrape of chair echoes with unbearable clarity. In the hospital, the silence before detonation stretches, broken only by the absurd clicking of a faulty detonator. On the ferries, the creak of wood, the lapping of water, the nervous murmurs of passengers build dread more effectively than music. These auditory choices remind us that settings are not only seen but heard, and that atmosphere is as much sonic as visual. Editing also plays a role in shaping space. Chase sequences are cut with frenetic rhythm, rapid intercuts between vehicles, faces, spinning tires, and flashing lights. The pace creates disorientation, immersing the audience in chaos. By contrast, the ferry sequence is edited with agonizing slowness, lingering on faces, on hesitating hands hovering over detonators, on clocks ticking. The manipulation of time enhances the mood of each setting, aligning editing rhythm with emotional intensity. The overall aesthetic philosophy is one of realism heightened into myth. The director rejects flamboyant fantasy in favor of grounded locations, yet the cinematography elevates them into allegory. Streets are real, yet filmed to feel like corridors of destiny. Skyscrapers are real, yet framed as cathedrals of ambition. Hospitals, ferries, prisons, all are real, yet transformed into metaphors through lighting, sound, and editing. The film thus achieves a balance, rooted in the real, but resonant with the mythic. The emotional resonance of these settings lies in how they mirror the characters' journeys. The vigilante's sterile bunker reflects his isolation. The district attorney's bright offices darken as his soul corrodes. The anarchist turns every space into theater, mocking sanctity with destruction. The city itself mirrors the struggle between order and chaos, its architecture trembling as ideologies collide. What lingers after the credits roll are not only the characters but the places they inhabited. The shattered bank, the glowing skyscrapers, the burning hospital, the silent ferries, all remain etched in memory, because they were never mere backdrops. They were battlegrounds of meaning, reflections of moral conflict, amplifiers of emotional weight. To revisit these settings is to revisit the very soul of the film, to recognize that its power lies not only in plot or performance but in the way its world was constructed, real, fragile, mythic, alive. And that is perhaps the film's greatest achievement. It turned a city into a mirror, its glass and steel reflecting our own contradictions, its shadows echoing our fears.